Welcome to the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I'm dedicated to helping you take control of your life. Together, we'll explore practical tips, expert advice, and inspiring stories to help you overcome obstacles and achieve your goals. Making small changes is possible and can lead to big results. Are you ready? Let's go do this. Well, friends, welcome to another episode of the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I am so excited to have Joe Crawford with me here today. Joe, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad you are also a fellow author. I got a copy of your book. I've been devouring it, so I can't wait to jump into what's in there. Your book is called "It Takes a Woman to Empower Women." So I love the title. I can't wait to dive into what's there. So just help my listeners. Let's just get started. A little bit of your background, who you are, and then we'll bounce from there.
Well, I'm a mom and I'm a grandmom. And I guess because I wrote a book, I can say I'm an author, although that's very surprising to me. I most of my life was a for-profit girl. Finance and management were my background. I bought and sold several companies and sold lots of real estate and checked all the right boxes, got married, helped my husband through graduate school, and had my kids. And in my late 40s, early 50s, and I think like many of us do, I wondered if there wasn't something more to life than what I was doing or getting or having. And started some heavy duty spiritual work. And because I was born and brought up in a very angry, abusive, alcoholic family, I had some time and decided that I wanted to do whatever I could do about what is generally called domestic violence, but what now I have come to call intimate terrorism, because it's a much better phrase, because we are terrorized by those we are most intimate with. So anyway, I started volunteering at a crisis shelter and met a woman who had fled from Chicago at the shelter, and she needed some help to get her legal documents because she had fled so quickly with her kids. She had no identification for herself or the kids. So when you think about that, she didn't really legally exist. So she could get no kind of help. So anyway, she came up to the crisis office after we got her settled and asked if I could help her. And she said she needed $40 to send to City Hall in Chicago to get her documents. And of course, it's totally forbidden for a volunteer to give money to a resident, but I have never really been very good with rules. So, and the funny thing is, and I do believe in the universe, and the universe set me up for this perfectly. I never have money in my wallet. And that day I had three $20 bills. And I'm like, oh, okay. So as I was leaving for the day, I went downstairs and I gave her the two 20s and I said, here's for Chicago. But she needed money orders and stamps and all that other stuff. So I gave her the third $20 bill and said, get what else you need and then take your kids to McDonald's for a treat. So she burst into tears. And of course, I burst into tears. So I'm driving home in a very nice car to a very nice house, thinking I have to do this in a bigger way. There is a gap between what agencies can do for crises versus what survivors need for the first step in the rest of their life. So that's how I became involved in Web of Benefit and the nonprofit.
Wow. Okay. So I can So I want to go with that. Your book, let's go back to your book, and then I want to go to the phrase you mentioned, intimate terrorism. So your book start and it ties back in with the story you just shared. Your book starts off with some of your personal journey, which you just talked about that incident with the not incident, but interaction with the gal at the shelter. But your book also talks about different types of abuse that women can face. What were some of the surprising things that you learned while you were defining the different types of abuse that one can encounter as you were writing the book? And, feel free to dive into what your book mentions. It talks about the different types of abuse: physical, sexual, verbal, psychological, emotional, the form of gaslighting and controlling behaviors. So, transition into that, and talk a little bit about what you have learned on your journey.
Well, I learned an awful lot as a child about the physical. I was not physically abused, but both my mother and my brother were. Um, but the psychological and the emotional abuse are really way more difficult to heal than a broken bone. But before I get into that piece, the title of the book has an asterisk and it says, "We are all survivors." And I'd like everybody listening to this podcast to know that abuse is on a spectrum, like so many other things. It's not yes or no, big or small. You mentioned gaslighting. Gaslighting is such an incredible, evil way of manipulating. It basically makes the person feel like they're going crazy. And the person making them feel that way is lying and making you crazy. So we have gaslighting, and I also call other forms of abuse before we get to the domestic violence, intimate terrorism piece. Isms. We have racism, and we have sexism, and we have anti-Semitism, and we have all kinds of isms. But the thing that I'd like all women to realize, and I think they do maybe on an unconscious level, we are born into a patriarchy. The minute we are born, we are less than because we are women. And we are not moving forward now. We are moving backwards, and our rights are being taken away. So we are born in a patriarchy. And then at a very early age, I think most of us are taught that we have to behave in a certain way. And boys will be boys, but girls can't be girls. They have to behave. And Glennon Doyle wrote an amazing book called Untamed. And she talks about the fact that we are tamed at very early ages. And I was tamed. My mom would say to me, "Can't you just be nice?" And I couldn't. And as time went by, I became a very angry teenager. But we have all these isms. We're born into a patriarchy. We have gaslighting. The book, chapter 2, yes, is about abuse. But the book is not supposed to be about abuse.
Right.
The book is supposed to be empowering women with great stories and specific steps and a roadmap of how to create a better life. But chapter 2 was the hardest chapter to write in that book. It was rewritten probably 10 different times.
Oh, wow.
It was really hard. And there are very good resources there. But so we talked about the physical abuse. And that can be from a slap to homicide, all the way along that spectrum. The emotional hurts our heart. The psychological hurts our mind. There is also spiritual abuse. Financial abuse exists almost everywhere there is any abuse. and this is one of the real reasons why women can't leave, is because they don't have the financial resources. So there's spiritual, there's financial, there's religious abuse, and control, and that gaslighting is part of that. But control starts in small ways, and it's insidious, and we don't know it until it's like, oh my God, it is so bad. How did I get here?
Yeah. Do you have an example of that? That would
Well,
be
it's like, okay, I'm controlling you. Actually, one woman who writes a story in the book, he would drive her to work and he would pick her up, and she saw nobody other than
okay.
that. She did nothing but go to work. He controlled the lights that she could turn on, the food that she could eat. And we make these little adjustments because we want to keep things okay, especially if we're feeling threatened. But I don't think there is one woman among us that has not done more and become less to stay in a relationship. So we have to be more and do less. And that's really scary, because when we rock the boat, we get blowback big time.
Yeah. I do want to highlight, and I want to echo what you shared about your book is not about abuse. There's the one chapter on that. But what I really, really appreciated about your book is that it is filled with hope. It is filled with action. It is filled with empowerment. And at the end of every chapter, it really causes the reader to pause, stop, and think about what they just read and then what they can do to help improve their situation. So I want everybody listening to hear, like, even though I asked that question about abuse, because a lot of the work that we could do and what women have experienced does stem from abuse and the different forms that they have taken in, but that this book offers them hope and practical steps in order to move forward and not feel so trapped. So I want to make sure everybody listening hears that and knows that that is, that there is something out there, even if you don't know where to start. And I think a lot of us stay paralyzed because you're so, like, you just don't know where that small step is. So if somebody listening, this is a small step for them, that they've got somewhere that they can go. You mentioned the phrase intimate terrorism. Would you mind talking about what that is? How do you define it, and how it ties into what you weave into the book?
Yeah, I did not come up with the phrase intimate terrorism. I read it several years ago, and I really have not seen it used since then. And unfortunately, I didn't know who to quote for that. But it is domestic violence, I think, minimizes what women go through, because A, there's nothing really domesticated about it. And B, abuse could be a one-time deal, where terrorism is every day, every minute. We are terrorized about what could happen to us. It could be a parent, it could be a sibling, it could be a dear friend, it could be somebody that we trust the most. That's what I mean by intimate. Are people that we should be able to trust the most. Like with my mom and my father attempting to murder her, that was a really intimate terror. And he was in and out of the house at least 5 different times up until the age when I was 13, when he attempted to murder her. So it's the terrorism piece is where we are walking on eggshells and we are scared all the time. And that can ruin mental health and physical health, because we are full of cortisol and and hyper vigilant all the time and totally stressed out. So yes, it's being terrorized by those who are closest to us.
Okay. All right. Well, let's start and flip the conversation now to where because the idea of abuse of intimate terrorism and stuff, we know where a lot of us know where the problem is. Let's flip it and offer people hope because there's hope out there. And I would say you would consider yourself a visionary. Reading your book, you definitely instill hope and paint a picture into the lives of the women that you meet. And since you are in the dream business, because I love your tagline, every time I get an email from you, it says "Dream big." You're always like challenging women, and I'm sure it's people that you meet as well, challenging them to think bigger than where they are. So my question is, how do you help yourself and others stay grounded in the reality of what is right now while keeping their eyes on what they are dreaming out there and what they want to become?
Could we take about 5 minutes to do a dream proposal?
Sure.
Okay. You might not have gotten to chapter 4, but chapter 4 in the book is all about the dream. And my nonprofit, Web of Benefit, was created to give monetary grants to survivors, never victims, always survivors, after they'd been away from their abuser for at least 6 months. Because it really takes 6 months to be out of the abuse where you are only in survival mode, to be able to even think about what you want to do next. So there are lots of vignettes in the book. There are also 5 stories written by survivors who we gave grants to, who very generously wrote and really put themselves out there. So I have to thank them all the time. But so I would meet. Actually, my dream was to help 100 survivors for $1,000, knowing there was a gap between the crisis piece and the first step for the rest of their life.
Okay.
Well, what happened? So that was, how was I even going to get $100,000? I had no idea. So anyway, it turned out to be 2,200 women for $1.5 million, which goes to show that none of us dream big enough, even me. But that was 12 years of hard work. So with the dream proposal, each survivor had to be referred to me by their advocate. And if there are women listening who are in abusive relationships right now, Google domestic violence agencies in your area. Some have shelters, but all have community outreach. You can get in contact secretly with these people and they can help. So you are not alone. There are also, at the end of the book, there are a lot of resources that are available. So anyway, the advocate would have to vet the woman coming to me for a grant, because I didn't know what her story was. I didn't know if she'd been out for 6 months. But so anyway, it would be the advocate and the survivor and me. And I knew that we had to just help her fashion what she wanted to have as her big dreams. I don't know if anybody's ever asked you, what is your biggest dream? But nobody had ever asked me what
No,
my biggest
nobody. No,
dream.
not when I was growing up. No.
Right. So I knew what my husband's biggest dream was. And that
Yeah.
became my biggest dream.
Yeah, I knew what my kids
But
were,
anyway,
Yeah, you're right,
yeah,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, when you're growing up, at least that was also my experience as well, and I remember a conversation I had with my grandfather where he asked me, "Well, what do you wanna be, when you go to college or grow up?" And I told him, I'm like, "Well, I wanna be a doctor of child psychology and help people," and the response was, "No, you can't do that. No, no, but go be a teacher, it's
right,
safer."
right, right.
Go do
Well, and
some
even if
you're
it's
gonna
not
raise your kids, do that, it's gonna be
right,
safer, and yeah, it's
if
in
it's
how
not
things.
said to you
Right.
verbally, it is said to you non-verbally.
Sure.
So anyway, I knew that we had to figure out how to get women to dream who had never been allowed to dream before.
Mm.
And what I really needed to create was a life plan for these women, or help them create their life plan. But if you use the word life plan, that is, I mean, if somebody said to me right now, what's your life plan? I was like, oh my God, I have no idea. So anyway, I'm a firm believer in the universe. And so I said, okay, what do I name this so I don't scare people? And anyway, it is called the Dream Proposal. So I would meet with the advocate and the survivor and me one-on-one. And I would do a dream proposal on a sheet of paper. So if your listeners want to get a sheet of paper and a pencil or a pen, we can do this in 5 minutes. We can actually do a mini life plan, which can be a roadmap for where you want to start and where you want to end. So the dream proposal has 3 major questions. What are your biggest dreams? What are the steps and goals? And what is the first step that you take tomorrow? That third question, when I was giving grants, was, what is the cost of the first step? Because we had a very specific budget. So the first question, what is your biggest dream, has 5 parts.
Okay.
You can fill in the parts later, but the first part is, what is your dream job? So that might be a timely question. Just for example, I gave a grant to a woman from Brazil. We gave grants to a lot of non-English speaking women, but we always had translators, which was great. So anyway, we had a Brazilian translator. This woman had finished 5th grade in Brazil, and she wanted to be a doctor. So I'm like, wonderful, you want to be a doctor. We'll figure that out in step 2. So then the second is, what is your dream house? Most of these women didn't even have apartments yet. But we didn't talk about what is a dream apartment. We dropped, what is a dream house? How many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, country, city? We literally designed a house. And then I said, get magazines, cut out pictures, keep the pictures. This dream proposal, oh, by the way, should go right on your refrigerator so you get to look at it every day. So dream house, then what is your dream car? Well, I'm a crazy car person. So my dream car is a Porsche. But anyway, so a lot of these women had 2 or 3 kids, and they'd say, oh, I want a minivan. I'm like, no minivans. You can have a Lamborghini or, whatever, Maserati, And then the fourth question was, what is your dream travel? But the first trip you have to take alone, no kids. Oh my God, how can I take a trip? Yes, you can. The second trip can be to Disney World with your kids. Then I have to admit, it took me probably 5 years to come up with the 5th question. And that is, what is your self-care? And then we talk seriously about self-care, because these women were not getting 5 minutes a day of self-care. So that's the 5 pieces of question number 1. Question number 2, what are the steps and goals? So let's take the Brazilian lady as an example. Knowing that I could give her up to $1,000, the money never went directly to the woman. It went to the landlord. We must have given 800 laptops, to education. So anyway, knowing that I could only help her up to $1,000, we had to figure, how is this woman going to get to be a doctor with 5th grade, right? Not speaking English. There are free English classes, which she could take, but she didn't have money for transportation. So we could give her 6 months of subway passes. She needed a laptop to be able to take that class, also to look for jobs, also to do college applications,
Right.
and also to look for getting her high school equivalency. So we gave her the laptop for that. So that was approximately $500 for those two things, because we could get laptops at a nonprofit rate from Best Buy. So we gave her 6 months of transportation. She learned to speak English. She got her GED, and she got accepted to a community college, and we could give her the application fee and one class. She finished community college and went on to 4 years. I have not spoken to her, so I don't know if she got into medical school, but I know she finished 4 years of school. And that was with a start of $1,000.
Wow. Wow. Small steps.
Oh, another thing, it's not just a small amount of money, but it is really true that if one person believes that you deserve your dream and have the power to create it, it changes lives. And I call that person a belief buddy. Everybody needs a belief buddy.
I
And
saw that in the book. I was going to ask you about the belief buddy.
you need to be somebody else's belief buddy so you can do this kind of stuff together. So, as I said, we did the steps and goals, but then we got back down to the bottom. What was the first step, and what is the cost tomorrow? And that first step for her was finding the English class. And I do believe, for everybody listening, if you take the first step, the second step will show itself. And then the 1 millionth step will show itself. But it's the first step. And it can be the babyest step ever. But is the step with you first knowing that you deserve it and have the power to do it.
Yeah. Mindset. That's a powerful story. And your book is laced with lots of encouragement and just taking the reader to understand and realize that what you tell yourself matters. And I hear that in that story, and with having a belief buddy, having somebody to say to you, you know what? Yeah, I think you can do that. I think one of at least I remember as well, my own childhood growing up, is hearing oh, you can't do that, or having that, oh, you're not smart enough to do that, or, why are you going after that thing? You're just going to have kids and stay home, and things like that. And how people will nonchalantly say something like that in passing and not realize that their words do have power. Our words are critical currency, I've heard it once said. And
Right.
so in that case, and in what you brought out in the book too, having somebody to believe in you and then turning around and paying that forward and doing that for somebody else as well. You mentioned briefly about the universe and working things out and taking that first step and then looking for the next thing. What is your take on law of attraction and manifestation? Where do you fall on that continuum of what one should take action on, like actually making things happen, but then also pausing and waiting for the universe to bring it to them? Where's your thoughts on that?
Well, I have to tell you, I believe in the divine plan. I believe in divine timing.
I do
Divine
too.
timing is not necessarily your or my timing.
True.
And if you think it's going to be, you may be very disappointed.
I'm laughing because it happened in my own life, but yes,
Yeah.
go ahead. I
But
digress.
I have to say that I think because of my childhood, where I had no control over anything, and of course, really what child does have control over anything, as I became able to figure out my own life in whatever wacky way I did that, I became a control freak. I held on so tight that I didn't allow the universe to do its job. I didn't wait. I had to boom, boom, boom.
Mhm.
One of my spiritual mentors, it's one of the greatest gifts she could have possibly given me. She said, Joe, control stops the magic. And it
Mm.
does.
I love that phrase,
So
control stops the
my
magic.
my deal is, first of all, I say surrender. I surrender. And then I say, God, show me the way. And I'm not a highly religious person, but when you ask, that is my prayer, God, show me the way. Not show me a specific way, but show me your way. And then, yes, you have to look for the signs. You have to be open. But it also means being vulnerable and taking some risks. And when you dream big, you need to focus small, the baby steps, but you also need to dream out loud, because you don't know who's listening that can help you with your dream. You
Mhm.
only obviously speak out loud with people that you feel safe with. I'm not saying go into Stop and Shop and tell some nutcase your dream, but dream out loud and don't be embarrassed by having big dreams. I have a sign that I'm looking at right now, right in front of my computer. It says, think abundantly. Energy follows intention. I have
Mm.
no idea who said that, but it's on a big plaque right in front of me. And it's really true. And I think a lot of people, when you talk about the power of intention, which of course was a great book, then they're saying, well, if I get sick, then it was my intention to get sick. No, no, no.
Mm.
It doesn't work that way. But what you said about words is so important, because things that have been said to us have created our core beliefs.
Mhm.
You're stupid, okay, or you're not smart, or whatever innuendo that was. Well, then I better not apply to med school.
Yeah.
I better not try to start a company.
Yeah. Especially when
I
those things are spoken to us over people that we thought we trusted or that we loved or that were in our realm, that would say those things to us. And then,
They create core
you they
beliefs.
yeah, create those core beliefs. And
Yeah,
it's
and those are hard to kick. It's like,
yeah, it's
I don't
challenging those
deserve.
beliefs. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I went through a process last year, of just a traumatic growth process. And what I did was I just to expand a little bit on this belief, what I did was I actually visualized a bubble around me. And then I decided if a belief came my way, I made myself very hyper aware of beliefs coming my way, and that they would get to this bubble that was around me, and I would evaluate that belief and say to myself, okay, am I going to let this belief into my world and allow it to resonate with me, or am I going to leave it outside the bubble, regardless, like not judging the belief or who it came from or anything, just objectively looking at it and say, okay, is that something that resonates with me or doesn't it resonate with me? And then allow it to either come into my world or reject it.
Right.
And that exercise was very freeing for me because a lot of my younger years, and I'm sure, some of these women also, where they're coming from, that they have been, and I carefully choose what I'm about to say, abused by other people's beliefs
Mhm.
and have come to believe those things that are false.
Right.
So it does really take this level of self-awareness into the beliefs that are entering your world and being able to then say, okay, I'm going to evaluate this. And that's what
Right.
happened to me. It's like I took other people's beliefs thinking that that's what I was supposed to do because that's what the good wife does. That's what the good person does. If you're in the church and so forth, you take on these beliefs, you believe them because somebody else told you that these are the things that you're supposed to believe. And I didn't question it for a long time.
Right.
When I started questioning it is when you start questioning those beliefs is when the empowerment starts to occur. So, yeah,
The
yeah.
curiosity piece of that is so
Abso
important.
absolutely. Absolutely.
I think
Um,
we all need to be more curious about um, everything in our lives. But so we speak to ourselves in ways that we would never speak to anybody else.
mhm,
Our self-talk, by and large, can be terrible.
yeah.
So being aware of our self-talk, I think, is really, really important. And saying, oh, if I drop something or break something, I'll say, oh, Joe, you idiot. No, you
Yeah.
can't say that. And I still, even practicing for years, well, boom, that's my first response.
Mhm,
So I think being aware of our self-talk and being really curious about where our core beliefs came from and how they no longer serve us is really important. When I started working with survivors, I knew that I'd be working with their self-esteem because
mhm,
it's been destroyed by their abusers. And then I came to realize that it wasn't just self-esteem, but it was worthiness.
mhm.
Because if you don't feel worthy, then there's no way you're going to have any self-esteem. And then, being the slow learner that I am, years later, I realized that the foundation of everything is our own self-forgiveness.
Mm,
We need to forgive ourselves for everything we imagine we've ever done wrong, or for everything anybody has ever said to us that we have done wrong. And just a blanket self-forgiveness. We are humans working as best we can with the tools that we have.
mhm,
And we need to forgive ourselves for not being perfect, because we are not, we never will be. But we are enough just the way we are.
mhm. That self-forgiveness piece, uh, I would imagine people struggle with because if you and how do you help women who struggle with the self-forgiveness piece, you know? And it could come from, "Well, I did this thing, and how can I forgive myself of that? I chose to do this thing. This is what, this is what happened." How do you help women who struggle with that self-forgiveness piece?
It's a really hard thing. And I still struggle with it. And the deal is that we are human, and
Mhm,
humans are imperfect. And I do believe that most of us are doing the very best that we can. And we have to, excuse me, we have to understand that that's okay. And everybody else is in the same boat, trying to do the same thing.
It it sounds like just going back to what your belief system is and rewriting it. Honestly, if you just go back to what you believe and what you tell yourself about that thing, that "Oh, I'm perfect." So if you have the belief that I should be perfect and I should have executed that thing perfectly, then that's the belief. You have to go back to that and say, "Well, wait a minute, you're not perfect. I'm not perfect. Therefore, the outcome was the best situation that I could have for that
Right.
thing." Right? Yeah. So,
No human being
yeah,
is perfect. And um,
it's an illusion.
Brene Brown, who is one of my absolute heroes, one of her great quotations is that worthiness has no prerequisites.
Mm,
I also believe that self-forgiveness has no prerequisites.
mm,
It just is something that we have to strive for and say, I am imperfect, but I am doing the best that I can. And that's the only thing I can do, is the best that I can. That's the only thing any of us can do, is the best that we can do.
And not listen to the outside voices that tell us we didn't do our
Oh,
best.
no
I
outside
think
voices.
and yeah,
They
I
they
think
are
that's what it
not
is.
allowed.
It's silencing the outside voices
Right.
and
They
not
are not
allowing
allowed to
them.
tread
Yeah,
on you.
that makes complete sense. While I was reading your book, one of the things that I enjoyed and appreciated about what you wrote is at the end of each chapter, you have that invitation to self-care and healing. And it's not just giving the reader information, but the opportunity for them to interact with the book. And this ties in with what we were talking about. One of those sections is called affirmations. And I wanted to pull out one affirmation that really stuck with me. And I wanted your thoughts on it. And it was the affirmation says, quote, "I don't have to be nice," end quote. And the reason it struck me is because I grew up in that time. Like, I thought I had to be nice, in order to be liked, in order to be everything else. When I read that affirmation, I was like, wow, okay, I don't have to be nice. Talk about this particular affirmation and what that means to you and why you wrote it.
Well, as I think I said, even starting like when I was 5, my mother would say to me, "Can't you just be nice?"
Right.
And to have to be nice all the time means that we're not allowed to be angry. Um, we're not allowed to care about ourselves first.
Mm,
We have to think of everybody else first. And we can't be honest, because to be nice in situations that aren't nice is to take away our authenticity.
mm,
And sometimes people aren't nice. And if you're nice all the time, it means you don't have any boundaries. And if we don't have any boundaries to protect ourselves, we really don't exist for ourselves.
mm,
We only exist for other people. It is okay to not be nice. And you can be not nice in non hurtful ways. If somebody wants to have a conversation with me that I don't want to have, I'll just say, "I'm not going to have this conversation." Or if somebody is doing something, I will say, "I believe that's inappropriate behavior." I'm not saying you're a jerk.
mhm,
I'm just saying I'm not, and it's the I word, not the you word. I
mhm,
am not putting up with that behavior. And I think so many women in abusive relationships were way too nice for way too long.
mm,
So it's okay to be nice, to not be nice, and still not hurt the other person. You can do
mm,
it in ways that are okay.
mm. Thank you for unpacking that. What's one thing that you thought would be hard about encouraging women in difficult situations and turned out that it really wasn't that hard? And then flip it. What was the other thing that you thought would be easy and it turned out being more challenging?
The the worthiness piece and the self-forgiveness piece working with survivors is really difficult, and
Mm,
I could only see them for such a short period of time. Many of them we followed up with each other, but with 2,200 women I couldn't keep up with all of them, and they went
right.
their way, and so did I. um, I think the thing that I had to realize was that all I could do was create a little spark with a dream, a little spark with the worthiness, um, and hope that that spark was going to take off. Um, the one thing that I thought that was going to be really easy about doing the nonprofit and working with survivors was the raising the money piece.
Mm,
And because the first grant that we wrote, we got $20,000. I said, "Oh, this is really easy, right?" The the fundraising to get the money to be able to write the grants was almost deadly to me. It was just a killer. I am not a good fundraiser. I am not good at asking for money. And because I had created Web of Benefit, it very much felt like, and of course I was the executive director as well, it felt that I was asking for money for myself. So that took me years to get over feeling that way. But the raising the money and the worrying about where the money was coming from, because I knew that there were so many women out there that needed that money. That was the really, I thought that was going to be easy, and that was really, really difficult. And by the way, I'm putting my dream out there. If anybody wants to give me $1 million, I will start all over again and begin giving grants again. But yeah, that was really hard.
What's something that very few people agree with you on?
God, I thought about that question when you asked it before, and I think there are a lot of people that don't believe in my belief about self-forgiveness. But I think there are a lot of people that think I have probably very strict boundaries. And I probably do. And it's not that I, don't love people and have friends, but I have boundaries about my time and my space and what's important to me. And I think sometimes that's difficult for people to understand.
Interesting. I wonder if it's because they don't have boundaries for themselves. It's very difficult to respect boundaries for others if you don't really know how to. And I'm not saying it's intentional or in any way, but if you don't understand how to set boundaries for yourself, then you don't understand why other people would set boundaries for themselves. It does make sense in a way because you do have to protect yourself. I mean, if we go down this road of self-care and understanding who we are, we have to take care. And this is one mission I'm kind of on as well, to help all, women understand that you have to take care of yourself first in order for you to take care of others. And I don't think that's a message that's preached enough. I've heard it from a number of different podcasts. I've had guests on. We've talked about the same thing as well. And that's the message you're also portraying as well, is that, you can't take care of others unless you take care of yourself. And one of the ways you can take care of yourself is by setting those boundaries. So, yeah. Yeah.
Do we have just a minute where I could read one page of the book about self-care that I think may resound with people?
Sure. Okay. Go ahead.
It's just a quickie. So this is an invitation to self-care and healing. Self-care begins with self-forgiveness and self-love and is accomplished by remembering the neglected, lovable child within. Self-care is an attitude, a mindset that allows us to put our own health and happiness first. This doesn't mean that you don't care about your kids or your partner. It means that you come first. Adopting this attitude means that once your needs are met, you can be what you need to be for others. Healthy, whole, and ready to happily help those you love. You may not be used to treating yourself well. Let's face it, most women who have been abused haven't learned the art of self-care and don't know where to begin. Start off easily, small if it feels right, or large if that's better. Here are some simple self-care activities. Prioritize your sleep, making sure you get the amount and the quality you need. Watch your nutrition. Learn to eat foods that support your health and energy. Take a walk by yourself. Walking is free and one of the best exercises for mental and physical health. Cook your favorite food, not your kid's favorite, yours. Enjoy it privately. Paint your nails, take a warm bath with bubbles, read a book or magazine you love. Are you getting the hang of it? These are things that require little or no money and will give you pleasure. I'm sure that you'll think of many other ways to soothe your soul once you get started, and no feeling guilty. Treat yourself the way you would treat your best friend. Be your best friend. Later, when you learn to heal your wounded child within, you can add one step at a time everything else you need to make your life what you deserve it to be.
I remember reading that. I actually highlighted it.
Good.
And I remember reading that part, just that self-care. We hear that as a term thrown around a lot. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it has to do with social media. I don't know if it has to do with just the times that we're in. But when we hear of something that we need to do for ourselves, we're always dispositioned to think of the grandiose and think of the big things that we have to do. Oh, I want to my self-care is I'm going to go sit on a beach in Jamaica or someplace like that. And it's a dream and might not even happen, but that self-care is just starts with something simple. So I'm glad you read that, because we think about taking care of everybody else first. So I appreciate that. So to anybody listening, go buy the book, go take care of yourself. Even if you're not, and I would say this as well. And I wouldn't consider myself in an abusive situation. Maybe in the past I would not consider myself in that situation now. But as I was reading your book, I was taking away many things that can help me. So I want to encourage those listening that if you don't feel that the topic of abuse actually matters or, is relevant to you, still go grab the book. Because to me, I feel like every chapter has an opportunity for you to take care of yourself. And even if you're not a person who comes from that background, you probably know somebody who has, and it will also empower you to become that buddy to help somebody else and better their life as well. Joe, as we come to a close, I love to ask all my guests this following question, and that is, what is one small step that someone can do today that's going to help them change their tomorrow?
Dream big and focus small.
I love that. And your book outlines how to do that too, right? There you go.
Right.
There you go. Thank you. Joe, how can people find you?
Well, they can go to the website, ittakesawoman.net. And from there, they can email me directly. They can see all of our social media there. And there are actually parts of the book for free on the website. And there are blogs that I've written. So there's help on the website without having to spend the money for the book. Although if you wanted to buy the book, that would be great, because every penny that I make on the book will go to women's organizations.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for the gift of your time. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you, and best of luck to you with everything.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And same to you. Same to you. And continue to help those that the universe sends your way. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I value your time with me, and I seek to make every moment count. In order to make lasting change in your life, listening is usually not enough. So I want to ask you, what practical steps are you going to put into action today as a result of listening to this podcast? Remember, any step, any action, no matter how small, starts your journey to a big win. And if you're not sure where to get started, reach out to me and let's have a conversation. Until next time, love yourself, then love others. Peace.